So this is the animal. So let's talk about chordates. Okay, so what exactly is a chordate? A chordate has to have a notochord, which is a long, firm, rod-like structure that goes down their back. They have to have a hollow nerve cord. Okay, basically it is a nerve that's filled with fluid, and it's a little bit it lies right above the notochord. You have to have pharyngeal structures, okay, which are paired structures in the throat, and basically what these are kind of like gill slits. And you also have to have a tail, okay, which is basically an extension beyond the anus. So you have to have all these four characteristics at least once in your lifetime. Now, what's a chordate? Okay, so a chordate, how we classify chordates, you have three subphylums. You have the tunicates, the lancelets, and basically anything with a backbone. Now, let's talk about vertebrata. Okay, so these are actual vertebrates. So they have to have a strong and flexible body. They have complex organs. They have a bilateral, so they have a left and right. They have two pairs of appendages. They have to have cephalization, or basically a head. They have a closed circulatory system, so they have arteries and veins. They have a cloam, which is basically a body cavity. And their skeleton has to be an internal support system. So how can they eat, or how do they feed? So you can either be a carnivore, which you eat others, a herbivore, you only eat plants, an omnivore, you eat both, a detritivore feeds on dead or decaying organisms, and then a scavenger eats organisms that basically others have killed. So there's two different ways that organisms or animals actually regulate their temperature. So you can be endothermic. That means they cannot regulate their internal temperature. We refer to these as cold-blooded. They depend on the environment to regulate their body. So these are fish, reptiles, and amphibians. Now, endothermic, they can regulate their body temperature. They're warm-blooded, and these are birds and mammals. So what do you think this lizard is? Endothermic or ectothermic? It's ectothermic. So these are cold-blooded. So you'll notice that lizards and reptiles and fish and amphibians love to bask in the sun. So let's talk about the body systems. Okay, so the circulatory system's there to transport oxygen and different nutrients around the body. Digestive, you break down and gain energy. Endocrine are your hormones. Excretory means you get rid of waste. Immune system is there to fight off infections. Integumentary is your skin, it protects the body. And your muscular is your muscles for movement. Now your nervous, this is your brain and your spinal cord. Basically, it's for your senses. Your reproductive is to make new organisms. Your respiratory is to, again, exchange that oxygen for exchange CO2 for oxygen. So you're trying to get rid of CO2. And then the skeletal is for support. So there's a couple different ways. There's three different ways that organisms can reproduce. So you have oviparous, which basically means that it's eggs that hatch outside. These are a lot of fish, amphibians, birds. Oviviparous is the eggs form, but they stay in the mother's body, okay? But they still receive that nutrients from the yolk. So these are like guppies. And viviparous is the embryo stays in the mother and receives nutrients from the mother. We refer to this as live birth. So let's talk about some important vocabulary. So closed system versus open system. Basically closed, you have vessels. Open, the body kind of leaks everywhere and the whole body tissue is exposed to blood. External versus internal fertilization. External is outside of the female's body. Internal is inside the female's body. Analogous versus homologous versus vestigial. So analogous means similar structures, okay, that basically evolve independently from each other. Homologous is structures that have a different mature form and adult form, but they share a common ancestor. And vestigial is basically a structure that's either reduced or just based anymore. So symbiotic relationships. We talked about this when we talked about ecology. So a symbiotic relationship is a relationship between two organisms. So you have commensalism. Commensalism means one benefits, one just doesn't really care. Mutualism, both benefit. And parasitism, one benefits and one is harmed. So let's talk about chordates and fish. Okay, so again, what is a chordate? Okay, so we are talking about the kingdom Animalia, the phylum Chordata. Okay, they have to have a dorsal hollow nerve cord and a notochord. They also have to have pharyngeal pouches or structures, which these do become gills, and they have to have a tail. Okay, most chordates are vertebrates. Okay, but there are some chordates that are not vertebrates. These are like your sea squirts or your tunicates that are here, or your lancelets. Now again, what is a dorsal nerve cord? Okay, so it's basically what is going to turn into the spinal cord, and your notochord is your cartilage rod. It's there for support. So are all vertebrates chordates? Yes, but not all chordates are vertebrates. What? So what's a vertebrate? So it's any animal that has a backbone. You have to have an endoskeleton. You have to have a spinal cord. And your front end of your spinal cord develops into a brain. So let's do a quick check. Okay, members of the phylum blank have a dorsal hollow nerve cord. So this is the phylum Chordata. During development, the pharyngeal pouches will become gills. All chordates belong to the kingdom, to the animal kingdom. True. All chordates are vertebrates. False. You are more closely related to a sea squirt than an earthworm. True. What are two animals that are chordates but are not vertebrates? This is your tunicates or sea squirts and your lancelets. An animal with a backbone is called a vertebrate. So I want you to take some notes. I want you to watch this video on chordates, okay? And you definitely need to be prepared to share what you found out from the video with a partner. So let's talk about vertebrate classes, okay? You have the jawless fish, cartilaginous fish, bony fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So what exactly is a fish? So a fish is anything with gills, scales, fin. Okay, so the very first fish actually didn't have any jaws. Okay, so the very first vertebrate that ever lived was fish. Okay, so we actually all evolved from fish as far as vertebrates. Okay, so this is actually a fossil of a ancient fish that actually had this one did have jaws, but it actually had armored plates instead of scales. So their circulatory system it goes from the heart to the gills to the body. Okay, so oxygenated poor blood leaves the heart, goes to the gills to get more oxygen, and basically the oxygen pore enters again from the heart, or enters the heart from the body. There we go. Okay, so they have a two-chambered heart. Okay, blood has to pass over the gills. Okay, this is called a single loop. Now, a single loop versus a double loop. If you look here, a single loop goes from the gills to the body, gills to the body, gills to the body to the heart. Okay, a double loop goes from the heart to the body, goes back from the body to the heart, goes to the lungs, lungs back to the heart. Okay, how do fish respire? Basically, the water passes over their gills and dissolved oxygen is added. So some fish have this gill cover. Okay, it's a protector. It's called an operculum. And then some fish, like these two, they have special organs that serve as lungs. They're called lungfish. So they actually can survive outside of the water for several minutes to even several hours. So how do they excrete? So fish maintain their water. Okay, they have to maintain their water balance through their kidneys. So kidneys are a #1 important structure to maintain homeostasis, or that balance. So saltwater fish tend to lose, okay, because salt sucks the water, and freshwater tends to gain. Okay, so remember hypotonic versus isotonic versus hypertonic. Okay, so this is basically why you can't put a saltwater fish in a freshwater fish or freshwater tank. Okay, but salmon actually have the ability to do both. So their nervous system is definitely a little complex because these are chordates. Okay, so they have their cerebrum. This is for thinking. Their cerebellum is for coordination. Their medulla is actually for basic like breathing, heart rate, that sort of thing. And their octave lobe is for vision. So if you look at this lateral line, it's really, really dark line that goes the width of their body. It actually senses vibrations in the water and they pick up on it. So let's do a quick check. Fish have a single loop. Mammals and birds have a double loop. 2 chambers of the heart is the atrium and the ventricle. Blood leaves the heart, goes to the gills, and then goes to the body before it returns to the heart. The covering of the gills is called the operculum. Blank is the maintaining of water balance, homeostasis. The part of the brain used for thinking and learning is the cerebrum. The part of the brain used for balance is the cerebellum. The blank system senses vibrations. The lateral line. Early fish did not have jaws. What fish alive today are like that? So the hagfish and lamprey. Okay. So there is another adaptation called the swim bladder. So it kind of looks like a balloon. So if you've ever gone fishing and you've reeled the fish up really fast, and it looks like this pink balloon that's popping out of their mouth, that's actually their swim bladder, and it helps maintain balance or maintains buoyancy through the water column. Helps them with with swimming. So sharks don't have a swim bladder, so if they stop swimming, they sink. So I want you to look at the fish are very famous for their fins. So you have a caudal fin. This is the big tail fin. It's for forward movement. The dorsal fin, like our sharks, this is for balance. Operculum is that cover. Pectoral is on their chest, and basically that's to help them steer left or right. The pelvic fin, that's kind of on their hips, that's to also steer. And then the anal fish is to keep them balanced. So I want you to see if you can identify the different fins on this fish. So scales. Remember, scales are very important in order to be considered a fish. So the scales are there to cover and protect the fish. So there's mucus on the scales, that's why they're really slimy. They're there to help and become more hydrodynamic in the water. And then just like a tree, you can actually take a scale off of a fish and it will tell the fish. So how do they reproduce? So some of them spawn, which basically the fish lays eggs that are fertilized externally, kind of like Nemo. Or some actually bear live young. When we refer to live young or baby fish, we refer to them as fries. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch this 1-minute video that shows a lemon shark actually giving birth. And some sharks just actually lay eggs. So again, there's the 3 different types of reproduction. You have oviparous, they lay eggs. Oviviparous, eggs stay in mom, and viviparous basically is what we do. This is live birth. So how does salmon reproduce? What do you think? They actually spawn and they lay their eggs outside of their body. So is that oviparous, oviviparous, or viviparous? Oviparous. So let's talk about amphibians. Isn't he cute? So what exactly is an amphibian? They're a reptile. They're a reptile. They're a vertebrate. They leave a double life. What does that mean by a double life? They actually go through metamorphism, which they change structure. They have moist skin. So remember how we talked about how fish were the very first organisms on planet Earth as far as vertebrates? Well, amphibians were our second. Okay, so their bones became much stronger. They were able to develop lungs and breathe air, and then they eventually developed limbs to actually walk on land. So here are 3 different types of amphibians. So we have 3. Okay, so remember we talked about the age of the fish. We also have an age of amphibians, which is our second one. So we do have 3 groups that actually survived. Okay, so we have salamanders, frogs, and chinolets, which is this thing. So how do they respire? So when they're in their larvae stage or tadpoles, they breathe with gills. When they become an adult, they actually develop lungs. Okay, so this is a mud puppy, and basically some actually, like this mud puppy, they keep their lungs their entire life. So they, unlike the fish, their heart is a double loop. They have 3 chambers, and so the 2 chambers up top are your left and right atrium, and your bottom one is your ventricle. So they do have this really special structure called a cloaca. So basically, eggs, sperm, solid waste, urine all leave from this opening and enter this opening. So metamorphism, we talked about having a double life, okay? So this is basically where you have a series of change that the organism grows. So what's the first layer, or first series? So they have an egg. They then turn to a tadpole. Then the tadpole morphs and basically grows legs. And then eventually that tail shrinks and you have an adult form. So there are 3 different types of amphibians. So we have our frogs, our toads, our salamanders, and our chinarets. So how many chambers does the heart of the frog have? 3. The opposite of terrestrial is aquatic. A series of changes that occur from birth to adult, tadpole to frog, is metamorphism. Tadpoles breathe using gills. The main organ of secretion is the kidney. Urine, eggs, and other waste exit through the cloaca. The opposite of carnivore is herbivore. The chinneret is an amphibian that does not have legs. The study of reptiles and amphibians is reptilology. To what kingdom do frogs belong? Animalia, phylum, chordata, class. It depends on which class you're talking about. Alright, so this is just a really cool video about these frogs. Or actually toads. So what's the difference between a frog and a toad? Toads are really big. Frogs are pretty small. Most toads are, they have more warts than frogs. And most toads actually can survive outside of the water a little bit longer than frogs can. So some cultures actually capture frogs and they eat frogs. So how many of you guys have ever eaten frog legs? If you haven't, they're delicious. Okay, but the toad on the right, this was actually in Australia. They actually had to ban these frogs, the captures of these frogs, because they released a toxin from their back. And some of the Australian people, the community members, actually were licking the toads in order to consume the toxin. And consuming that toxin actually made them hallucinate. So they had to actually outlaw the licking of frogs and toads in Australia. So let's talk about reptiles. So basically reptiles were the first to completely transition from water to land. Okay, so some adaptations to land you can see here. Okay, the very first one was the amniotic egg. Okay, so this is basically an egg with a protection layer. Okay, so frogs and amphibians do not have that shell or that protection layer. Okay, so this was the very, very first egg that could actually survive outside of the body, outside of water, and be completely fine. So if we look, okay, so the reptiles actually have, the egg is waterproof, but the shell is very leathery, okay, compared to like a chicken's egg. So they do have waterproof skin. Okay, so they have keratin just like your hair, and it prevents them from water loss. And amphibians, they don't actually have this, so they can't stray from the water or basically they'll dry out. So some external structures, they all have limbs with toes or claws. Okay, that gives them the ability to dig or climb. Some of them actually have suction cups to help them with climbing. And they all have scaly skin. So how they respire is they have lungs, they do not have gills, and they respire just like us. So they do, just like amphibians, they do have a double circulation. They have a 3-chambered heart, but alligators and crocodiles actually have a 4-chambered heart. So how do they excrete? They actually secrete, they do conserve water, okay, and they have this type of, it's called uric acid, which is kind of like almost watery poop, if you will. So how do they regulate? They are ectothermic, so they're cold-blooded, so they have to bask in the sun. or if they get too hot, they hide in the shade from overheating. So we talked about reptiles. Okay, reptiles, we know, talking about origin and evolution, we know that most reptiles are what? Dinosaurs, right? Okay, flying reptiles like the Stegosaurus. So we do know that reptiles do closely resemble dinosaurs, if you will. But the modern day reptile, okay, so we have 4 living classes that we know of, and we actually have 6,000 species of reptiles. So let's talk about the snakes. Okay, snakes are probably evolved from lizards. And how do they move? They basically are sidewinders. Okay, they can move laterally, or they can move basically in kind of like squares. So most of them we see in that S shape, or that's they slither. Okay, but like desert snakes, they actually sidewind. Now, why would you want them to sidewind if you're in the desert? Less surface area. So how do they feed? Basically, they have to. They're common. They're carnivores. Snakes don't really see well or hear well, and they don't really have any limbs, so they actually smell. They smell excellently. So if you notice, when they flick their tongue, they're actually smelling, and they're picking up smells from their tongue. So some of them have venom that they basically inject the poison into their prey, and the neurotoxins basically work on the nervous system and make the prey paralyzed. So how do they swallow or digest? So their upper and lower limbs actually are hinged, but they can move independently. And so basically the jaws or the hinges actually stretch so they can unhinge them, and they can swallow an entire organism in one quick swallow. Okay, but this process does take several hours. So how do they defend themselves? So they a lot of them are green. Okay, so like this picture on the left, so they combine with foliage, or some of them are brown if they live in they hide under bark trees. So camouflage is their number one defense. Or some of them signal, like this cobra. Some of them hiss. Some of them make different sounds, like with the rattle of the rattlesnake. So how do they reproduce? So they have to have, males actually rely on a scent from the females, okay, to actually say, hey, I'm from your species. They glide along each other. They basically kind of smooch, kiss, and then they fertilize internally. Okay, so the snakes actually are oviparous, or some of them are oviparous. Most of them are most of them are oviparous. Some of them are oviviparous. Okay, and then some of them actually produce live young, so they can do all of them. So here's a little quick tip for you. Okay, so this is a milk snake. This is actually, it looks like a coral snake, but it is not. So a milk snake actually uses mimicry in order to make itself look like a cobra. Or coral snake. So you can remember this little saying, red next to black, friend of Jack. Red next to yellow, kill a fellow. Now what about this scarlet king snake? Is it safe or not? It's safe. Okay. So your coral snake, venomous. Your scarlet king snake, not venomous. So this is just a really cool picture of a snake eating a mouse. So here's some snake bites. Okay, this is dealing with neurotoxins. So let's talk about the animal kingdom, particularly birds. So there's 6 characteristics of birds, or aves, class aves. So they have to be endothermic, which is warm-blooded. They have to be vertebrates, they do have hollow bones. They have to have a 4-chamber heart. They all have feathers. They all lay eggs, and they have scales on their feet and legs. So how do they fly? Okay, so the top has basically less air pressure, and this allows the birds to produce that upward force. Okay, this is actually called lift. So there's some birds that don't fly, like the penguin, the ostrich, and the emu. The smallest bird is the hummingbird, and the largest bird on Earth is the ostrich. So migration, okay, so this is a pretty regulative periodic journey that they basically move from one place to another, either for warmth or for reproduction. So there's a couple different types of feathers. So you have contour feathers. This is the larger feathers. This gives the body, the bird's body shape. And then down feathers are kind of short and fluffy, the ones to the left, and this traps heat. So how do they develop? Okay, so the female bird usually lays eggs in their nest. Okay, and depending on whichever parent, one of the parents will incubate it and basically sit on it. Okay, so they cover it. Sometimes they can cover it with basically they cover it with this abdominal portion of their skin called the brood patch. And in penguins, the male emperor actually heats the egg by placing it on its webbed feet. Okay, so incubation period can last anywhere basically up to 21 days. Is normally the incubation. So, and you can see here in this chart that the majority of the time period, okay, the egg is mainly when we're looking at a chick embryo or a chicken. Okay, so we're talking about grams. We're not talking about ounces or even pounds. So basically, when the embryo starts hatching, it makes this star-shaped crack in the shell, and it actually has this scale-like tooth that we call an egg tooth. And basically the chick presses and scrapes using the egg tooth, and eventually the egg tooth does fall off as soon as the chick is hatched. So some of the birds, they have a couple different styles of rearing young. So some of them lay eggs, they incubate them, and as soon as they see them walking or swimming or feeding themselves, they say, adios, you're on your own. Some of them will take several weeks to actually prepare them, show them how to feed themselves, how to walk, how to swim, and then some of them, like I said, will just say, adios, see you later, as soon as they're hatched. So some of the parents basically allow these birds or teach these birds some very complex behaviors such as courtshiping, nesting, or even migration. Okay, so and a lot of the young birds still kind of need that protection until they develop enough strength to either fly or obtain food on their own. These birds are very territorial, so during mating season, basically the male birds actually establish an area, okay, and just let the other males know that this is their territory. So the male actually tries to attract the female in this general location. So it might be a courtship behavior. He might sing. He might attract the male or the females by using his brightly colored feathers. Some of them sing. Some of them do a dance to all kind of get the female over to this location. So nest building is really important. Not only does it hold the eggs, but it conceals the young bird from predators. Okay, and it basically provides shelter from the elements. So they build these nests in very well hidden spots. Okay, sometimes it's in trees, sometimes it's in the ground. It all kind of depends. And basically, a lot of the times, the birds actually just kind of construct their nests from almost anything. So twigs, grass, feathers, mud are the most common. Sometimes they actually use trash and litter, wrappers, anything that they can find, yarn. So we talked about migration. So there are some cues that birds do need in order to help them navigate. A lot of the times it's the position of the sun. Sometimes it's landmarks like mountains. Sometimes it's actually magnetic cues, such as change in air pressure. They read these cues in order to adapt for their flight, and this enables them to migrate to and from basically anywhere. So let's compare birds to reptiles. So what are some characteristics that only birds possess? They have feathers. Okay, what are some characteristics that only reptiles have? They have claws. Okay, so in between, they both actually have scaly feet and scaly legs. So let's talk about a mammal. Okay, so the mammals are our last group. This is kingdom Animalia. Okay, same phylum, they're Chordata. They are the same subphylum, which is Vertebrate, but they're in the class Mammalia. So what do you get when you cross an elephant with a fish? Swimming trunks. Ha 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 ha. So what kind of animal is this? This is an anteater. So let's talk about evolution, okay? So mammals did not come to dominate the world until the Cenozoic, okay? This is way after dinosaurs even became extinct. So this is the original mammal. It kind of looked like a rodent, and it was nocturnal. So how do mammals stay warm? So mammals have to have hair, and the hair actually insulates most of these mammals. But there are some marine mammals like our killer whale to our left and our humpback whale to our right. And they actually, with additional to hair, they have subcutaneous fat or blubber. So what's a placenta? So placenta is basically attached to the wall of the uterus, and it provides nutrients with nutrients to the fetus. Okay, so you can see here on the right side, it's when the baby is getting ready to be born, it should be towards more of mom's rib cage. And if you look here, this is what sometimes people call the afterbirth. The afterbirth, you can see on the left, it is a sac, and you can see there on the bottom left that white cord. That's actually the umbilical cord that connects mom to baby and connects that nutrient. So this is a little graphic, but I want you to take a look at this video. This is a video of a giraffe giving birth. So what are mammary glands? They're only found in mammals, and they basically are there to produce milk to feed young. So if you're a mammal, you have to have mammary glands in order to feed young. So we also have this thing called a diaphragm. So you might, if you ever have hiccups, hiccups are basically where your diaphragm is spazzing. Okay, so it contracts and relaxes really quickly. So this actually helps you with breathing in. So when you breathe in, the diaphragm goes down. When you breathe out, the diaphragm goes towards your lungs, and it basically compresses your lungs to force the air out. We do have specialized teeth. We have incisors for biting or cutting. Okay, those are our front teeth. Our canines, those are for stabbing or holding. We have 4 of those. And our molars are way in the back. So this is for crushing and grinding. So depending on your teeth, depends on your diet. So what do you think our diet might be? If we have all 3, and if you're a predator, you normally have large canines, and if you're a herbivore, you mainly have large flat molars. So what do you think we might be? We're actually an omnivore because we have all 3 types. So again, most of the canines you can see here, so our cats here, they have really, really large and very sharp canines, and this is for ripping and tearing flesh. So as mammals, we have a really diverse digestive process as well as diets. Okay, so if you're a herbivore like this cow, the cow actually doesn't have an additional stomach like most people think. They just have an additional stomach chamber called a rumen. Okay, and this helps to digest plant product. Okay, so again, this holds bacteria that specialize in breaking down plant material such as cellulose. So we have a 4-chamber heart, and we also have a double loop. So what other animals have a double loop? Birds and reptiles and amphibians. As far as movement, again, we're really diverse. Okay, some can run, climb, dig, fly, swim. Okay, so legs are really adapted to their particular job. So like this horse, obviously it has hooves and it can't really climb or fly, but it can run and dig a small amount and swim. So tetrapods. Tetra means 4. So any mammal that has pretty much all mammals are tetrapods, so they have to have 4 limbs. So, but depending on your function depends on what your limbs actually look like. So some limbs are adapted. So like this bat, its forelimbs are actually adapted for wings, and for whales, your flippers are actually adapted for swimming. So an animal that is bipedal, that means that it can walk on 2 legs. So what's an animal that mainly walks on 2 legs? Well, us. But whales only have 2 flippers. That is true. Remember, whales don't have hind limbs, okay, or hind limbs, but they do have vestigial pelvic bone. So at one point of their developmental stage, they did have those 4 limbs. So that's why we refer to them as a tetrapod. So let's do a quick check. What attaches to the uterus wall or nourishes an embryo? The placenta. What muscle helps mammals breathe? The diaphragm. Which type of tooth is used for grinding? Molars. What part of a cow helps them digest plants? The rumen. The structure of the jaw and teeth can give you information about an animal's diet. Mammals have a double loop. Diversity refers to different kinds. So let's talk about the orders of mammals. So the first order is Monotremata, okay, or monomeres. These are our egg-laying mammals. They're only found in Australia. They have both reptilian characteristics like a cloaca and being able to produce eggs, and they have mammalian characteristics, which they have hair limbs. So there's 2. There's the left one, which is our duck-billed platypus, and the right one, which is our spiny anteater. So this is a quick video that I want you to take a couple minutes and look at. So our order marsupial, okay, so these are mammals that bear their young in a very immature state. Okay, so their babies have to develop into a pouch. So again, the majority of these ones are found in Australia. So, but the marsupial that are found in other continents are our opossums. So we have our kangaroo, our koala, our wombat. Okay, can you name these 2? So this is a birth of a kangaroo. So remember how we talked about a placenta? Okay, so the third group, or third order, are placental mammals. And placental mammals do have a gestation period. So a gestation period is another name for pregnancy. So if you look here, this is the gestational period or the pregnancy period of a human. So not just humans, okay, so you can actually see the human on the right. What do you think this organism on the left is? It's actually a dog. So if you want to watch the birth of puppies, we can watch this. We'll watch this video. This is actually a really rare photograph. This is a baby that has not. This is a C-section or cesarean, where they actually cut open the uterus, and this baby is technically not born yet because it is still in its amniotic fluid. Okay, so you see how that cloudy fluid around the baby, that's actually the baby lives in an aquatic environment, so that's why that they have gill slits at one point in their development. So you can actually see the top of the baby's hair. He or she has very thick hair next to the left side of the doctor's hand. So domesticated animals, basically, this is the ones that we keep and we breed. Okay, so pigs, cows, horses, dogs, sheep. Now, why do you think animals on different continents kind of look alike? So you have a flying squirrel versus a sugar glider. They live on different continents, but you can see some similarity between the two. This is due to biogeographic. Okay, remember, this is where, evolutionary speaking, they have split, but they're still related. Okay, this is convergent evolution. So you have unrelated species that are adapted to similar environments and similar niches. So this is actually a sugar glider. So which mammal lays eggs? The montromeres. Okay. Mammals that carry young in their pouch are called marsupials. The length of time a mammal grows in a uterus is called gestation period. This structure attaches the fetus to the uterus and provides nutrients. That is your placenta. Name a mammal that has a cloaca. The duck-billed platypus or the spiny anteater. Why do unrelated animals resemble each other? Due to convergent evolution. So let's talk about the mammal orders, okay? So we talked already about the montromeres. They lay eggs, they have a cloaca, and here is our baby platypus. Or you can have the relative, which is the spiny anteater. Our next one is our hoofed animals, okay, but they have even number of toes. So they are very large grazing animals like a cow. So relatives to a cow are deer, pig, sheep, and buffalo. So these are just kind of two funny videos if you want to take a chance and check it out. So our rodents, these have one single large pair of long incisors. They're gnawing animals like mice or chinchillet. So you have squirrels, gerbils, rats, hamsters. They're all relatives of mice, rodents. So take a quick minute and check out this video. So our Lophomorata, these have two large incisors. Their hind limbs are adapted for jumping, and they're herbivores, like our rabbits, or our hares, or our pika. Okay, so the character from Pikachu, okay, or the character Pikachu, actually was created off of this organism, the pika. So our carnivores, these are large. They have large canines for killing prey. So the only carnivore that is actually a herbivore is our panda bears. So some other carnivores are like your foxes, your raccoons, or even your dogs. So take a couple minutes and check out this panda. So also is a large carnivore, your big cats, like your tigers and your leopards and your wolves and your polar bears. So primates, this is where we actually fall in. So we have a very well-developed cerebrum, which is the thinking part of our brain, and we have opposable thumbs, like our baboons. Okay, so us, chimps, gorillas, orangutans, we are all primates. So cetaceans is our aquatic mammals, and they have a blowhole up at the top for breathing, and they also have blubber, which help them insulate themselves. So this is like our dolphins. So check out this video. So some relatives are porpoises, our beluga whales, our humpback whales, our killer whales. So what the heck is a narwhal? Take a couple minutes and check out this video. So our next one is our proboscidea. Okay, they have trunks and tusks. Okay, there's two species. You have your Asian, okay, and your African elephants. This is your African elephants. If you notice, they are much larger compared to our Asian. Our Asian ones are very small, and their ears are very small. So take a couple minutes and check out this video. Now, again, we talked about our marsupials. Okay, they are pouched mammals, and they live in Australia, like our kangaroos. Our koalas are our possums towards the right. And what is this little guy to the bottom right? Anybody know what that is? That is a Tasmanian devil. And our bandicoot. Check out this video. So our next one is our hoofed animals, but again, unlike our even-toed numbers, these guys have odd-toed numbers. So like your rhinoceroses, your tarpons, okay. So also your donkeys, your zebras, and your horses. So our next one is our the next order has teeth, okay, with no enamel, or some of them actually don't have teeth at all, like our armadillo or our sloth. Now this is just a baby sloth that you need to take a look at this video. So our next group are our winged mammal. This is about 1/5 of all mammals. So this is our bats. Insectivores have long snouts, and they are insect eaters, and they're also diggers like moles and shrews. And take a look at this video. Now your next one are your manatees, or your dugongs in Japan. So the manatee is to the top and the dugong's to the right. Okay, so they're herbivores, they live in slow water, and they are slow moving, so we actually refer to these as sea cows.